Hi everyone, I'm Lydia Palmer, and this is my video for my paper topic. I learned a lot throughout this course, but something that really stood out to me was learning that the Confederate States did not have a federal Supreme Court. My research into why such a court was absent began to reveal reasons aside from my initial assumption that the government simply never got the chance to establish one, especially due to the ongoing war. I found instead that there were numerous factors, some of which were ideological in nature, that contributed to this lack of a Supreme Court. One of the significant ideological ones was the basis on which the Confederate government was founded, which was states' rights. The Confederacy, which was founded on a states' rights ideology, which lent itself to such a judicial model that lacked a federal Supreme Court, and the Confederate Judiciary instead relied upon the individual district courts of the states, which enjoyed expanded jurisdiction since the Confederate Founding Fathers abolished the circuit courts. In the debates surrounding the drafting of the Provisional Constitution, there was significant debate about how to approach establishing a Supreme Court in a states' rights system of government, and some, such as Judge Thomas Semmes, thought that the judicial model without a high court to be the only way to stay true to the founding values of the Confederacy. At one point during these debates, he stated that when we decide that the state courts are of inferior dignity to this court, we have sapped the main pillar of this Confederacy. Regardless of the many ways proposed to establish a states' rights-focused high court, Semmes' model won out. The Confederacy relied upon the state district courts for constitutional interpretations and all other judicial matters. While this did undoubtedly support the Confederacy's commitment to states' rights, it also created a significant amount of confusion, vagueness, inconsistency, and participation by the court of public opinion in judicial matters. Without a federal Supreme Court, the Confederacy had no federally binding legal precedent, allowing individual district court judges a wide margin for creating their own interpretations of issues and controversies. One of the places in which this problem presents strongest is the prosecution of loyalty, it had a large role in the Confederate courts. It was one of the main kind of areas in which the court system really got to decide controversies. This was an issue for both sides, though, especially due to the fact that Lincoln did not recognize the Confederacy as the legitimate nation or government, while the Confederacy certainly did acknowledge themselves as a legitimate government. The lack of Supreme Court and the federally binding judicial precedent that would have been present had there been one, however, served to create a large amount of confusion on the Confederate side alone. Loyalty was a topic that was greatly contested in Civil War America, and the court system reflected this with large amounts of trials for being disloyal to one's country. The impeachment trial of West H. Humphreys, himself a district court judge, provides an example of the confusion created by both the lack of Confederate Supreme Court as well as the increase in popular participation in the judicial process. In Humphreys' case, he was impeached from his United States judicial office for accepting a Confederate judicial office without submitting a formal resignation to the United States government. Due to Lincoln's lack of acknowledging the Confederacy, this was viewed as treasonous and disloyal. On the Confederate side, however, Humphreys was viewed as a loyal Confederate judge, and his simply accepting the Confederate office sufficed as a resignation. Confederate newspapers, especially in his home state of Tennessee, where he served as a judge, reflect just what a waste of time they think the United States impeachment proceedings were. Humphreys, for his part, after the war, partially explained his actions, asserting that by joining the Confederacy, he necessarily broke all his ties with the federal government, making formal resignation meaningless and unnecessary. But that relied upon the recognition of the Confederacy as a legitimate government that he then allied himself with in replacement for the United States office. This controversy appeared not just in Confederate officials, but on a smaller scale as well. Many Confederate citizens were accused in the court of public opinion of being disloyal to their government or of holding Union sympathies and subsequently hauled before the courts. The Confederate court became a major forum before which leaders of the new government paraded civilians suspected of retaining allegiance to the Union, and these convictions and sentences that these people received often varied greatly depending upon state, court, judge, and public opinion in the area. Had there been a Supreme Court, these inconsistencies would have been less likely to occur, as there would have been a federal definition for the term loyalty from the national court that the district courts could have employed in dealing with such cases. And this wouldn't necessarily have just gone for a meaning of the term recognized by the courts. It could have been a legal test that they could have used to establish what it really meant to be loyal or disloyal to your government. And the lacking and lacking that kind of precedent really presented a lot of inconsistency for enforcement. Regardless of governmental ideology, some form of federally binding judicial body is necessary to avoid the kind of conflict that presented in the Confederate court system. This inconsistency issue showed up most prominently in the numerous cases calling loyalty into question. In absence of federal judicial precedent, public opinion often attempted to fill the gap in these cases, causing further confusion and discrepancy for the judges. These loyalty trials took place for both Confederate officials, as in the case of West H. Humphreys, on a national stage, as well as on the state level concerning citizens accused of harboring pro-Union sentiment, which was never a safe thing to have in the Confederacy. Regardless of level, the lack of true precedent from a Supreme Court on the issue left it wide open to interpretation and vast inconsistency in both meaning and enforcement.